Do you know, Lena, I always find myself thinking about the story of that Chinese girl, Sue.
Of course, I know her. How could I ever forget? She lived in a remote village and tried to bring honor to her family, just like every other girl.
Come with us. Let us tell the tale of Sue, the girl who, one day, would become the most beautiful flower among them all. Long ago, in the land of China, in a distant village, there lived a girl named Sue. Sue always tried to be like all the other girls, to bring honor to her family, but she was not always graceful. When Sue went to the matchmaker, the woman who was supposed to find her a husband, she accidentally spilled tea on her. The matchmaker, furious, shouted, "You will never bring honor to your family."
Sue returned home in sorrow. She loved her parents deeply, and the thought of disappointing them was unbearable. But her father smiled at her and, pointing to a nearby tree, said, "How beautiful the blossoms are this year." Then he reached out and gently touched her hair. He slipped the comb into it, and added, "But one of the flowers bloomed late, and I believe it will be the most beautiful of them all when it finally blossoms."
Suddenly, the sound of horses' hooves echoed through the streets. The Huns had invaded China. The emperor's aide shouted, "By order of the emperor, every family must send one man to serve in the army." When the aide called the Fu family, Sue's father stepped forward to serve in the army. "No, father," Sue cried. Her father was an old man, and he had already fought for the emperor in a past war. That night, Sue sneaked into her parents' room. She took the notice summoning her father to the army and placed her comb, the one she used in her hair, in its place. Then she quickly slipped out of the room. Sue cut her long black hair with her father's sword. Then she put on his armor to fight in his place. Sue knew the danger that awaited her. According to Chinese law, a woman could not be a soldier. What if someone discovered her secret? But Sue loved her father deeply, and she could not bear to let him go to war. Sue stepped out into the pitch-dark night, treading carefully through the village alleys. Fear filled her heart. With every step, she felt that someone might discover her secret. At the break of dawn, she reached the main road leading to the soldiers' camp. She saw hundreds of men walking together, carrying their swords and spears, each one ready to sacrifice themselves for their country. Sue moved forward, keeping her voice low and behaving as if she were a young boy. At the camp gate, one of the guards stared at her and asked, "What is your name, soldier?" Her heart pounded, but she replied in a steady voice, "My name is Fu Hao, and I am ready to serve the emperor." The guard nodded in approval, then signaled her to enter. And so, Sue found herself in the heart of the camp, among the ranks of soldiers. The real journey of hiding her secret and proving her bravery had begun. Sue trained long and hard alongside the other volunteers. The most difficult task was retrieving an arrow from the top of a tall pole, a challenge no other volunteer could accomplish. But Sue was clever. She figured out how to use her wits. She wrapped a rope around the pole, then began to climb it bravely, completing the task successfully. After the training ended, Sue and the other soldiers headed to the mountains to face the Huns. In a snowy mountain pass, the Huns launched a sudden attack. They rained blazing arrows down on Sue's army, slicing through the cold air. Then they advanced toward their forces, letting out terrifying war cries that echoed between the mountains. Sue realized she had to think quickly. She grabbed the last cannon and ran toward the attacking Huns. Then she lit the fuse, and the cannonball roared through the sky. It struck the snowy mountainside, and within moments, the snow collapsed like a raging flood onto the evil Hun armies. Their own deceit turned against them, and chaos spread through their ranks. Sue mounted her horse. As the snow tumbled down from the mountain, she spotted her commander, partially buried in the snow. Without hesitation, she summoned all her strength, bravely pulled him out, lifted him onto her horse's back, and rode him away from danger, just in time before the cascading snow could bury them both. When Sue reached the camp, she cried out in pain and clutched her side. she had suffered a deep wound in the battle. The commander shouted anxiously, "Bring the doctor at once." The doctor entered and carefully examined her wound. After finishing, he left the tent and whispered into the commander's ear in a low voice. The commander's face turned pale with shock, and he thought to himself, "What? Could Sue really be a woman, disguised in a man's uniform?" And according to Chinese law, the punishment for such a dangerous deception was certain death. The commander felt both upset and angry at Sue's deception, but he remembered that she had saved his life. He was torn about what to do, and after much thought, he decided to let it slide. Thus, he spared her life in return for her brave deed. Then he and his army marched toward the imperial capital, leaving Sue behind. With sadness and worry, Sue gathered her belongings and prepared to return home. Along the way, her gaze wandered. She took a deep breath, wiped away her tears, and continued on toward an uncertain fate. Suddenly, Sue spotted a group of Huns who had survived the battle, secretly making their way toward the imperial capital, where the emperor lived. At that moment, Sue realized she had to do something. Sue rushed to the imperial capital, where she found her commander and told him anxiously, "Some of the Hun soldiers are still alive, and they are on their way here." But the commander looked at her coldly, then turned his back and walked away. Sue tried to warn the other soldiers, but she found no listening ears. And Sue walked through the alleys of the capital, trying to convince anyone of the danger of the approaching Huns. She heard the sound of drums rising from afar. Her anxiety grew, and her heart pounded as if warning her of what was to come. Moments later, she spotted the black banners of the Huns rising on the horizon, led by a small but determined army bent on revenge. The people of the capital gathered in fear, and voices rose. "The fortress! Close the gates! The Huns have returned!" As for the commander who had ignored Sue's warnings, he now found himself trapped between the anger of his soldiers and the panic of the people. Then Sue stepped forward, raising her voice with courage. "If we do not fight now, the palace will fall before dawn." Everyone fell silent for a moment, and eyes met between the commander and Sue. The commander realized that if he did not listen to her this time, the entire capital would be destroyed. He raised his sword high into the sky and shouted, "Hear her words, prepare for battle." With sharpness and wisdom, Sue led the soldiers to form tight ranks, taking advantage of the city's narrow streets and winding alleys. She forced the enemy to move through tight paths, where their chances to maneuver were limited. When the Huns launched their attack, Sue made it easier for the imperial soldiers to engage them in specific locations, using clever deception and innovative tactics. Her courage and steadfastness strengthened the soldiers' morale, and they began to fight with enthusiasm and discipline. The commander watched her closely, amazed by her courage and intelligence. Every move Sue made followed a precise plan, and every small instruction she gave made a difference in the flow of the battle. The soldiers began to realize that she was not only brave, but also smart, moving with a rare military intuition. In the midst of the clash, Sue led a sudden, coordinated attack, leaving the Huns confused and thwarting their attempts to breach the fortifications. Shouts and cheers from the soldiers filled the city squares, and even the commander gave silent signs of admiration, grateful for Sue's bravery and the cleverness that protected the capital. By the end of the day, the Huns had retreated in defeat, and the capital remained standing thanks to Sue's steadfastness and brilliant tactics. She became a legend, celebrated by both soldiers and citizens alike. The emperor granted Sue 2 gifts, the emperor's sword and a necklace bearing his royal emblem. He then offered her a position as a member of his council, but Sue politely declined, for it was time for her to return to her family. When Sue arrived home, she presented the emperor's gifts to her father, but he quickly set them aside. Then he embraced his daughter and said with a smile, "You are the greatest gift and honor, my daughter. Sue's heart filled with joy and love for her family, and she realized that her entire journey had led her to understand that the greatest victory is the gathering of loved ones and the love of family. And thus, the story comes to an end.